My headlights washed over the back of his car, but the light did not help me. His rear bumper sat across the mouth of my driveway like a locked door. I pressed my brake and my hands shook on the wheel. Behind me, inside my house, something hit the basement door again. It sounded like a fist, slow and patient. I could not stay. I could not leave. I shifted into reverse and rolled back until my tires kissed the curb. I tried to angle out, but his car was parked wide on purpose, not just close. It cut my driveway in half. I laid on the horn. The sound bounced off the houses and died. No porch light turned on. My street stayed dark like it listened. I got out and walked up to his car. The air smelled like hot engine and sweet smoke. His windows were up. His doors were locked. He parked so close to my driveway edge that my side mirror would have hit him if I tried to push past. I stared at the plate and felt my throat tighten. He had done it again. Not a mistake. Not a quick stop. A block. It had started small weeks ago. He had left his car there for a few minutes, then hours, then whole nights. Each time I asked, he had smiled like it was a joke. He had said I could go around. There was no around. I had shown him the tow warning sign by the curb. He had laughed and told me it was not real. I had called him entitled in my head until the word stopped feeling strong enough. I walked to his front door and knocked hard. The sound went into his house and did not come back. I knocked again. Through the window beside the door I saw movement and warm light. He was not asleep. Music played low. I heard a woman laugh, sharp and excited, the kind of laugh people used when they tried to impress someone. He had company. He still did not come. I stepped off his porch and looked back at the street. I felt exposed under the empty sky. The banging from my basement had stopped, but that silence felt worse. It felt like waiting. I went back to his car and leaned close to the driver window. The glass reflected my face in a dark blur. For a second the blur looked wrong, like it smiled when I did not. I forced myself to breathe and scan the ground. That was when I saw the chalk. A thin white line ran across the edge of my driveway, almost hidden in the dark. It marked the exact spot where his rear tire sat. Another chalk mark showed where his front tire should stop, like he had practiced the angle. I crouched and touched the line. It smeared on my finger. It was fresh. My chest tightened. This was not careless. He had measured it. He had planned it. I looked up and saw a small black camera on his porch tucked under the railing. It aimed straight at my driveway. A red light blinked once, then went dark. He had been watching for me to come out. He had wanted me to see that I could not move. I walked back to my car and my phone felt slick in my hand. No service. I tried again. Still nothing. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned, then shoved the phone in my pocket and turned toward his car once more. I needed proof. I needed something solid, something I could point at when I called a tow truck and he tried to charm his way out. I moved along his windshield and saw a paper tucked under the wiper. It was not a parking ticket. It was a clean white sheet with neat printed text. My address was at the top, correct down to the last number. Under it was a list of dates, each with a time window beside it. Most had check marks. Tonight's date had a box drawn beside it, still empty. At the bottom, one line stood out, underlined twice. Make sure he stays home. I carried the paper to his porch and knocked again. This time I did not stop. I hit the door with my knuckles until my hand hurt. The music inside dipped, then rose again like someone turned it down for a second. I leaned toward the window and saw his shadow pause, then move away from the door. The porch camera clicked. It was a small sound, but I heard it. The red light blinked once more. I felt watched in a way that made my skin crawl. I stepped sideways so the camera could not see my face straight on. I knocked again, slower, like I had all night. His door opened just enough to show his eye and part of his smile. He looked calm. His hair was neat, like he had prepared. I held up the paper. He did not glance at it. His gaze stayed on me, steady and flat. I told him he blocked my driveway again. I told him I needed to leave right now. I told him something was wrong in my house. My voice shook on the last part. He did not ask what was wrong. He did not even blink. He opened the door wider and stepped onto the porch. A woman sat behind him on the couch with a drink in her hand. She watched me like I was a problem he would solve. The neighbor kept his body in the doorway like a gate. He spoke in a low voice and told me I could wait. He said it like it was a rule. I said he had no right. I pointed at the chalk marks by the driveway edge, visible in the streetlight. I asked him why he measured it. His eyes shifted for the first time, not to the chalk, but to my front door across the street. He stared at it for a long second. Then he looked back at me and smiled wider. He told me I should not be outside this late. He said I looked tired. He said I was confused. His words sounded kind, but his face stayed cold. I told him to move the car. He said no. He said he was busy. He said my driveway was not an emergency. The woman laughed from inside. The laugh did not match her eyes. She raised her phone and aimed it at me like she recorded. The neighbor kept his voice low and clear. He told me to stop making noise. He told me the street did not like noise. I looked around and saw curtains shift in other houses, then fall still. No one came out. I stepped closer and tried to look past him into his house. I saw a second camera inside on a shelf, pointed at the front door. I saw another pointed at the hallway, aimed toward the back of the house. I saw a thin cord run along the baseboard like a vein. The neighbor followed my eyes. His smile stayed in place, like it was attached. He leaned toward me and lowered his voice even more. He told me he had seen me check my basement window last week. He told me he had seen me count the locks on my doors. He told me he had heard me on the phone, asking about tow laws. He said my fear made me predictable. Then he asked me if the banging had started again tonight. My mouth went dry. I had told no one about the basement. I said nothing. The neighbor took a small step forward. His shoe crossed onto my side of the porch line just a few inches like a test. He did not rush. He did not touch me. He just stood too close, and I felt my body react like a trapped animal. I backed down the steps. I told him one last time to move his car. He shook his head once, slow and sure. He said I would not do anything. He said I needed him more than I knew. The porch camera clicked again. The red light blinked as if it approved. I walked back to my car with my hands clenched so tight my nails bit into my palms. I sat in the driver's seat and stared at his bumper blocking me in. I pulled out my phone again. The signal bar flickered once, then held. I opened my notes and typed one line, "Tow Company." I searched fast, found a number, and saved it under one word. Tow. Then I looked at my house, at the dark basement window, and I pressed save like it was a promise. I stayed in my car and watched his porch for a full minute. The music kept playing. The woman laughed again. His camera light blinked every few seconds like a slow eye. The basement stayed quiet, but my mind kept hearing that patient banging. I forced myself to become careful. If he wanted a scene, I would not give him one. I opened my phone camera and held it low by the steering wheel. I took a photo of his car across my driveway, then another that showed my curb cut and the edge of my property line. I zoomed on his plate. I took a short video that showed my car trapped and the street name sign in the same frame. My hands still shook, but the proof looked clean. I got out again and walked the driveway line. I filmed the chalk marks by his tires. I crouched and filmed my fingers smearing the fresh chalk. I moved slow and steady like I was working a job. The porch camera clicked at me. I did not look at it. I filmed it too, the lens aimed straight at my driveway, the tiny light that blinked when I moved. I remembered the paper under his wiper. I filmed it in my hand, my address at the top, the dates, the check marks. I zoomed on the underlined sentence, "Make sure he stays home." My stomach turned as I said the words out loud for the recording. My voice sounded thin. A small sound came from my house, not a bang, a soft scrape like wood on wood. I froze and turned. My front door stood shut, but the porch light above it flickered once, then steadied. I had not touched that switch since I came home. I had left it off. I walked back across the street and kept my phone recording. The air near my steps smelled different than before. Sweet smoke again, but closer, like someone had been standing here. I looked down and saw a smear of dirt across the first step, fresh and wet. It had not rained. My shoes were dry. I knelt by my front door. The lock plate had a bright scratch on it, a thin line where metal had been dragged. The mark looked new. I touched it and felt a sharp edge. My skin prickled. I moved the phone closer and filmed the scratch, then the knob, then the gap under the door. I went to the side of the house where the basement window sat low to the ground. I kept close to the wall, eyes on the dark yard. The window glass was unbroken, but the screen sat loose in one corner. The frame had a bend, slight but wrong. Mud printed on the concrete well below the window, a half shape like the front of a shoe. The print faced the house, as if someone stood there and leaned in. I heard a faint tap from inside the basement. One tap, then nothing. My throat tightened. I backed away without turning my back to the window. I filmed the footprint, the bent screen, the silent glass. I whispered the date and time to the camera, then realized my phone did not show the correct time. It had jumped ahead by 9 minutes. I hurried back to the driveway. His car still blocked me, solid and calm. His porch camera blinked again as I stepped into view, like it tracked me. I stood by his bumper and looked down at the chalk. There were more marks than I saw before. Thin lines near the curb, almost rubbed away like a practice run. Voices rose from his house. I walked closer, staying off his porch. The front window was cracked open a little. I heard his voice clear through the gap, low and pleased. He spoke to the woman like he gave her instructions. He said the night had to go right. He said it was his big Tinder date night. He said he did not want any interruptions. Then he laughed once and added, calm as a promise, that I would not be going anywhere anyway. His car blocked my driveway again, but it was worse than before. He did not just cover the mouth. He parked so far across it that his rear tire sat on my concrete. I could not even step into my own driveway without brushing his bumper. It felt like he had claimed it. I stood at the edge and stared at the chalk lines. New lines sat beside the old ones. He had redrawn them, darker and thicker. A fresh check mark had been added to tonight on the paper list under his wiper. The box was filled in neat and heavy, like someone finished a task. My phone's signal flickered, then held. I did not knock this time. I did not ask. I stepped back into the shadow of my car and called the number I saved. A woman answered. I gave my address. I said a car blocked my driveway and I was trapped. I said the owner refused to move it. I said I had photos and video. My voice sounded too calm for how fast my heart beat. The woman asked for the plate. I read it out and watched the digits on the screen as I said them, like the plate might change. She told me a truck could come soon. She told me to stay safe and not confront anyone. When she said that, I felt my stomach drop, like she knew more than a normal dispatcher should. I asked how long. She said 15 minutes. I waited in my car with the doors locked. I watched my house. I watched his porch. His camera blinked on and off. The music inside his house kept playing. The basement stayed silent, but I kept seeing the bent screen and that shoe print in the window well. A minute later, my porch light turned on again by itself. I saw it from my windshield, a small yellow glow on my steps. I had not touched the switch. I stared at it until my eyes watered. Then it clicked off. Then on again, like a signal. I raised my phone and started recording without thinking. I filmed my porch from across the street. The light stopped flickering as soon as my camera pointed at it. I lowered the phone. The light flickered again. I felt cold all over. Headlights appeared at the far end of the street. A tow truck rolled in slow, the orange beacon turning in steady circles. The sound of its engine filled the quiet like a warning. The driver parked along the curb and got out. He was a big man in a dark jacket. His face looked tired, but his eyes moved fast. He asked if it was my driveway. I nodded and showed him my phone. I showed him the photos of the plate, the video of the blocked driveway, the chalk marks. I did not show him the paper list at first. I did not want to sound crazy. He watched the video once and then looked at the neighbor's porch camera. That thing watched him too. The red light blinked and held for a second longer than before. The driver frowned. He asked if the owner was home. I told him yes. I told him he refused to move it. I kept my words tight. The driver said he had to confirm it was private access. I pointed at my curb cut and my driveway apron. He walked closer, checked the angle, then nodded like he had seen this kind of problem before. He still looked uneasy. He backed his truck toward the car. The metal arm lowered with a heavy clank. The sound made every window on the street feel alive. I held my breath and watched my neighbor's front window. The curtain did not move. The driver hooked the wheels. He pulled a lever and the lift groaned as it took the weight. His orange light swept across my house, then across the neighbor's porch. For a moment, the rotating light made the porch camera look like it turned its head. As the car's front end rose, a sharp sound came from my house. One hard bang from the basement door, loud enough to carry outside. The driver froze and looked at me. I did not explain. I could not. The neighbor's car tilted higher. The suspension stretched and creaked. The driver adjusted the chain and tightened it. The tires hung inches above the ground. Then the music next door stopped. In the silence, the tow truck lift made one last strained groan as it locked into place. At that exact moment, my neighbor's front door swung open. He stepped onto the porch like he expected to see me begging. He wore a clean shirt and a dark coat. His hair looked perfect. His smile was already set, ready for someone else. Then he saw the tow truck and the lifted front wheels of his car. For a second his face went blank. The smile stayed, but it did not fit anymore. He looked from the chains to the driver, then to me. He did not shout. He did not rush. He just stared like he tried to understand how the world had moved without his permission. The tow driver kept his hands on the controls. He asked if the car belonged to him. My neighbor said yes. His voice sounded calm, but it carried. The driver told him the car blocked a private driveway and a tow was authorized. My neighbor looked past the driver to the chalk lines near the curb, like he checked his own work. He stepped down one stair. His porch camera blinked. He did not look at it. He looked at me and his eyes hardened like a door closing. He asked me if I called. I said yes. I said I warned him. I said I had proof. My words came out steady. It surprised me. His jaw tightened. He let out a short laugh that sounded forced, like he practiced it. He told the driver to unhook it. The driver shook his head and said he could not. He told him he could take it up with the company. My neighbor walked to the end of the driveway and stood too close to the lifted car. The orange beacon light spun over his face, making his eyes flash bright, then dark, then bright again. His date arrived right then. A small car rolled up and parked across the street. A woman got out. She wore a light jacket and held her phone up like she checked the address. She smiled when she saw him, then her smile faltered when she saw the tow truck and the chains. She stopped on the sidewalk and looked from him to me, then back to the lifted car. My neighbor straightened like he stood on a stage. He put on a friendly face again, but it trembled at the edges. He called her name, soft and careful. He told her it was a mistake. He told her someone had a problem and overreacted. He glanced at me on the last word, like he tried to turn her attention into a weapon. The woman did not move closer. She looked at the tow driver and then at the neighbor. She asked what happened. Her voice was polite, but it had distance. The tow driver kept his eyes on his equipment. He did not answer. He did not need to. I held up my phone, still recording. I did not point it at her, only at him and the car. My neighbor noticed the phone and his eyes narrowed. He looked at his porch camera too, then back at my phone. It looked like he counted cameras the way other people counted exits. He walked toward me, slow, hands open, like he tried to appear reasonable. He stopped a few feet away, close enough that I could smell his cologne under the sweet smoke. He asked me to stop filming. His voice stayed quiet. The date watched, her head tilted slightly, as if she judged a conversation she did not want to join. I told him to step back. I told him not to come closer. He did not move. He lowered his voice until it was almost a whisper. He asked if I enjoyed this. He asked if I liked making a scene in front of strangers. He spoke like he knew I hated attention. Behind him, the tow driver finished securing the lift. The car sat ready to go. The tow truck engine idled low. The orange light painted everything in rotating slices. The date took one step back on the sidewalk. She looked at my neighbor as if she saw him for the first time. She said she did not like drama. She said maybe another time. She started to turn away, her face tight with discomfort. My neighbor did not chase her. He did not call out. He did not plead. His eyes stayed on the tow truck as it began to pull forward. The chains tightened. His car rolled, lifted, leaving the chalk marks behind like empty footprints. As it moved, something fell from the underside of his bumper. A small dark object hit the street and skittered to the curb. It stopped near my driveway. I saw it was a key, not a car key. An old key, dull brass, taped to a thin tag. The tag had my address written on it. The tow truck turned the corner and his car vanished down the road. The street went quiet again, too quiet, like it held its breath. My neighbor watched the empty space where his car had been. Then he turned to me. The anger on his face faded and something sharper took its place. His mouth went still. His eyes looked clear and cold. He spoke softly, like he did not want the date to hear as she walked away. He said, "Now you cannot say you did not choose it." My neighbor did not move after he spoke. He stood at the edge of his porch with his hands at his sides. His face stayed calm. His eyes stayed on me without blinking much. The date walked away and did not look back. The street felt empty again, but I felt less alone than before, like I had been placed under a light. I bent and picked up the brass key by my curb. The tape tag stuck to my fingers. My address sat on it in dark ink, written neat and careful. I held it up so I could see both sides. On the back, someone had written 2 letters and a number, B7. I did not know what it meant, but my stomach tightened like I already did. I looked up. My neighbor still watched. He did not shout. He did not threaten me again. He only lifted his phone once like he took a picture. Then he turned and went inside without hurrying. His door closed soft, like he did not want anyone to hear it. The porch camera across the street blinked as I walked to my house. My porch light clicked on before I reached the steps. I stopped and stared at it. The light stayed steady, bright on my door and the scratch marks on the lock plate. I walked up anyway, keeping my phone in my hand. I filmed the knob and the deadbolt, then the edge of the door. The door opened too easily. I knew I had locked it. I remembered the sound of the deadbolt turning before I left. I pushed the door wider and stood in the entryway, listening. I heard nothing from the basement. I heard nothing from the rest of the house. The silence felt arranged. I locked the door again and checked the chain. The chain slid into place, but the screws that held it looked different. They looked newer than the rest of the metal. I leaned closer and saw fresh marks around them, tiny circles where a tool had turned. I had never changed those screws. I walked through the rooms fast, not searching for comfort, only for proof. A drawer in the kitchen stood out by a few inches. I closed it and opened it again. The items inside were not in the order I kept. A small packet of spare batteries sat on top, like someone had handled it and put it back wrong. On the counter, my keys sat where I did not leave them. I went to the back door and checked the lock. The strike plate had scratches like the front. The weather strip along the frame had a thin pinch mark, as if the door had been shut on something thin. I pulled it with my fingers and found a short piece of clear plastic wedged behind it. It looked like a strip cut from a bottle. It looked like something used to test a latch. I went down to the basement door. The smell hit me first, sweet smoke again, faint but real. The door looked normal, but the knob sat at a slight angle, like it had been tightened and not aligned right. I held my breath and put my hand on the knob. It felt cold and damp, as if someone had touched it recently. I took out my own basement key and held it in one hand. I held the brass key in the other. I tried my key first. It worked, but the turn felt rough, like grit sat inside the lock. I did not open the door. I pulled my key out and stared at the brass key again, at the taped tag with my address. Then I slid the brass key into the same lock. It fit perfectly. It turned smooth, like it belonged there. It clicked with a clean sound that my own key never made. I stood still with my hand on the key, staring at the basement door, and I understood the worst part. This key did not look new. It looked used. It looked carried. My neighbor had not waited for tonight to learn how to get into my house. I pulled the brass key out of the basement lock and stared at it until my eyes hurt. My own key sat in my palm like it was suddenly useless. The lock did not feel broken. It felt shared. I walked back upstairs and set the brass key on the table under a bright light. The taped tag still showed my address. The ink looked dry, not fresh from tonight. It had been written days ago, maybe longer. I thought about the paper list on his windshield, the check marks, the neat times, the line that told someone to make sure I stayed home. I brought up the video I took earlier and paused on the list. I zoomed in until the letters blurred. I wrote the dates and times down on a notepad with a shaking hand. The times were not random. They were tight windows, 2 hours here, 3 hours there. Almost always late when the street was quiet and most lights were off. I opened my phone photos and scrolled back through the last month. I had not been taking pictures for fun. I had taken them because things kept shifting in my house. A cabinet door left open. A chair moved an inch. A basement window screen bent at a corner. I had told myself it was stress or forgetfulness or the house settling. My pictures showed the truth. The changes always happened after nights I got trapped in my driveway. He blocked me and I waited, or I stayed home because I did not trust the basement, or I left later than I planned after he finally moved the car. Those nights formed a pattern of delays, a forced schedule. I went to the kitchen drawer again and spread everything out. Batteries, a small flashlight, a roll of tape, a spare phone charger. The items were there, but some felt lighter, like they had been opened and used and put back. The tape end was torn at a new angle. The flashlight had fingerprints on the lens. I opened the closet near the front door and checked the shelf where I kept old documents. A folder sat out of line. I pulled it down and saw a gap where a small envelope should have been. The envelope held a copy of my lease and my basement inspection report from when I moved in. It was not there. My throat tightened as the pieces clicked together. He did not need to steal valuable things. He needed information. He needed access. He needed to know what I would notice and what I would ignore. The banging in the basement had always started on the same kind of nights too. Not every night. Only when I seemed trapped. Only when I stood at the driveway and argued or called or waited and stared at his car. The noise pulled my attention inward. It kept me thinking about my own door, my own locks, my own fear. It kept me from watching the street. I took out the brass key again and looked at the letters and number, B7. I walked through my house with it, checking for anything labeled. I opened my breaker panel in the hallway. Each switch had a small printed label: kitchen, living room, basement. There was no B7. I went down the stairs without opening the basement door, and I stared at the wall beside it. A shelf unit sat there, old and dusty. It held paint cans and cleaning bottles from the previous owner. On the side of the shelf, half hidden by the shadow, a small sticker had been placed. It was worn, but I could read it. B7. I stepped back, heart pounding. That sticker was not mine. It looked like something from storage or an inventory label. It did not belong in a normal house. I thought about my neighbor's camera aimed at my driveway, not at his own car, not at the street, at me, at my arrivals, at my attempts to leave. He did not just want to annoy me. He wanted to know where I was and when. The list on his windshield was not a record of his parking. It was a schedule for my movements. It showed when I would be stuck outside, or when I would be forced back inside. It created a routine I did not choose. I heard a soft sound above me, not in the basement, outside. A faint scrape near my front porch like a shoe on concrete. I held my breath and listened. Then I heard it again, slow and careful, like someone tested a step. I understood then, with a cold clarity that made me feel sick. He did not block my driveway to keep me from going somewhere. He blocked it to make sure I was exactly where he needed me, at specific hours, while something else happened around my house. And whatever that reason was, it had not ended with his car getting towed. I did not call the police. I did not trust what I could prove yet. I trusted only simple things that could not argue back. I took a roll of clear tape and tore off 3 strips. I laid one across the top edge of my front door, from frame to door, so it would tear if the door opened. I laid another on the basement door the same way. Then I placed a 3rd strip low on the back door, where a hand might not notice it in the dark. I took a handful of dry rice from the kitchen and sprinkled it in a thin line on the inside floor right in front of the basement door. I sprinkled another thin line on the inside floor in front of the back door. Rice moved easily. It held shape until someone stepped near it. I wanted marks I could not forget or misread. I went outside once more. I kept my phone recording as I walked. I sprinkled a light dust of baking flour in the basement window well, just enough to show a shoe print. I put a small piece of tape on the corner of the loose screen so I could see if it shifted again. I did not fix the screen. I wanted to know if someone returned. I turned off most lights and sat in the hallway where I could see the front door and the basement door at the same time. I held the brass key in my fist until my fingers cramped. My phone stayed in my other hand, screen dim, camera ready. I listened and counted minutes by my own breathing. The street outside stayed quiet for a while. Then my porch light clicked on. I did not move. I waited for it to click off again, but it stayed on this time. I heard the softest scrape on my front steps, slow and careful, like someone tried to place a foot without sound. I raised my phone and started recording in the dark, aimed toward the front door. A shadow passed under the door through the thin gap at the bottom. It paused. I heard a faint click outside, like a fingernail tapped the lock to feel it. My stomach tightened. I did not hear a key go in. I heard only a soft rub, like someone pressed a thin strip between door and frame. The clear tape at the top of the door did not tear. The handle did not turn. Whoever stood there did not try the door like a normal person. They tested it. They listened. They waited. The air in the hallway felt thick, like it had been held still by a hand. Footsteps moved away from the porch. I heard them cross the side path toward the backyard. I stayed seated, silent, and let my phone keep recording. A minute later, I heard a faint scrape at the back door, then nothing. I did not hear the back handle. I did not hear the tape tear. The person outside moved like they already knew where not to touch. I waited until the porch light clicked off again. Then I moved, slow and quiet, checking my traps first. The tape on the front door stayed intact. The tape on the back door stayed intact too. The rice lines by the back door and basement door looked untouched. That should have made me feel safe. It did not. It told me the person outside had not needed to open a door. I went to the basement window well with a flashlight and kept the beam low. A clear shoe print sat in the flour where there had been none before, heel deep, toe pointed toward the window. The screen tape I had placed had been peeled back and stuck on again, but not in the same spot. A thin smear of flour marked the inside edge of the window frame, like fingers had reached in and brushed it. I lifted the flashlight and scanned the yard. Across the street, my neighbor stood at his front window. I saw his face in the glass, pale under his indoor light. He did not pretend to look away. His head stayed still. His eyes stayed on my house. I went back inside and replayed the video. It caught the porch light turning on. It caught the shadow under the door. It caught the sound of that soft click. It did not catch a face. It did not catch hands. It caught only proof that someone had been close enough to touch my lock without opening it. I locked the front door again and slid the chain into place. I stepped back into the hallway and listened. Then I heard it, breathing, right on the other side of the front door. Slow and steady, like someone pressed their mouth near the crack to taste the air. A voice came through, quiet enough that it almost sounded like my own thought. He said my name. I did not answer when he said my name through the door. I backed away until I reached the kitchen, then I called the police with my voice low. I told them someone stood outside my door and knew my name. I told them I had video, a footprint, and a key tagged with my address. I said I believed my neighbor was involved. While I waited, I emailed my landlord the same files. I sent the photos of the blocked driveway, the chalk marks, the porch camera aimed at my property, and the paper schedule I had taken from the neighbor's windshield. I sent the video of the shadow under my door and the porch light changing. I added one line that felt like it burned my screen. A stranger key opened my basement lock. The breathing outside my door stopped before the police arrived. It stopped so clean that it felt controlled. I checked the tape on the front door. It stayed unbroken. That meant he had not opened it. It also meant he had been close enough to test it and leave without leaving a mark like he had done this before. 2 officers arrived 10 minutes later. Their flashlights moved across my porch and my lock plate. One of them touched the scratch marks and frowned. I showed them the brass key and the tag with my address. I showed them the flower print in the basement window well. I showed them the video with the shadow. I watched their faces change when they saw the list of dates and times. One officer asked where my neighbor lived. I pointed across the street. At the same moment, my landlord called back and said he was on the way with a locksmith. He sounded angry and scared at the same time, like he had seen this type of problem once and never wanted to again. The officers walked me to my front window so we could look out without stepping outside. My neighbor stood on his porch as if he had been waiting for this moment too. He did not look surprised by the police. He looked annoyed, like I brought guests without asking him first. He raised his hand in a calm wave. Then he lifted his phone and tapped the screen, eyes still on my house. My porch light flickered once, then steadied. The officer beside me saw it happen and looked back at me. We stepped outside together. Cold air hit my face and made my teeth ache. The officers kept me close, but they let me speak. I told my neighbor he needed to stop coming near my doors and my basement. I told him I had evidence. I held up the brass key and the taped tag. He smiled, small and tight. He said it was not his key. He said I must have planted it. He said I looked unstable. He said he had cameras and could prove I was the one causing trouble. One officer asked him why his porch camera faced my driveway. My neighbor's eyes flicked to the camera, then back to the officer. He said it was for security. He said the street had problems. He said he watched out for everyone. Then he leaned closer, just enough that I could smell that sweet smoke again. He kept his voice low, but I heard every word. He said I should have stayed inside last night. He said the hours were important. He said I ruined the window. The officer did not react to his words, but I did. My stomach tightened hard. He had not said date night. He had not said towing. He had said window, like time slots on his list were not a joke but a rule. My landlord pulled up then, fast, with a locksmith right behind him. They walked over with tools and a folder of papers. My landlord asked what was going on, and the officer told him to stay back but listen. I took the paper schedule from my pocket and handed it to the officer. I watched my neighbor's smile slip for the first time. His eyes went to the list like it was a private thing pulled from his skin. I told the officer the truth, clear and simple. I said the neighbor blocked my driveway to control when I could leave and return. I said the banging and the missing envelope always followed those nights. I said his key fit my basement lock. The officer looked at my neighbor and asked him one direct question. He asked why a key tagged with my address opened my basement. My neighbor started to speak, but no sound came out. His gaze moved past us, locked onto my basement window well. His face tightened as if he listened for something that none of us could hear. I took one step toward him and held the brass key up at chest level so everyone could see it. I said, "If it is not yours, then stand here and watch while we open my basement with it." My neighbor finally broke his calm. His eyes went wide and wet with anger, and his voice came out sharp, not loud but urgent. He said, "Do not open it while he is still in there." The officer grabbed my neighbor's arm before he could step back. My neighbor tried to pull away with a calm face, but his body betrayed him. His shoulder jerked. His eyes kept darting to my basement door. He said he meant a raccoon. He said he heard noises before. His voice turned fast and messy. The second officer asked him one more time whose key it was. My neighbor stared at the brass key like it burned. Then he stopped talking. He shut his mouth tight and looked at me with pure hatred, like I had taken something from him that mattered more than his car. My landlord told the locksmith to open the basement with my key first, not the brass one. The locksmith nodded and kept his hand steady. The officer told me to stand back. I stood on the third stair and watched the door like it was about to breathe. The lock turned. The door opened a few inches. A smell rolled out at once, sweet smoke and damp dirt. The air felt colder, like it came from a deeper place than my basement should have had. The officer pushed the door wider and swept a flashlight beam down the steps. The light caught a line of scuff marks on the steps, fresh and dark. It caught the edge of a thin mattress on the basement floor. It caught a plastic water bottle half full and a pile of snack wrappers pushed behind a box. It did not look like a break-in. It looked like a camp. The officer went down first. His boots moved slow. The second officer followed. The beam moved across the walls and stopped on something that made my landlord swear under his breath. A small camera sat on a shelf, pointed up at the basement door. A wire ran from it into the darkness behind the shelves. It disappeared into a gap I had never noticed. The gap looked too straight to be an accident. My neighbor made a sound outside, sharp and small, like pain he tried to swallow. He twisted against the officer holding him. He looked toward my house and shouted one sentence through clenched teeth. He said, "You were supposed to stay in the driveway." The officer tightened his grip and turned him away from my door. That movement exposed my neighbor's wrist for a second, and I saw a thin strip of clear tape stuck to his skin. It looked just like the tape I had placed on my doors. The officers cleared the basement. They did not find a person, but they found signs that one had been there very recently. The mattress was still warm. The water bottle had condensation. The dust near the gap behind the shelves had a clean path through it, like something dragged in and out. They pulled the shelves aside. Behind them, a narrow access panel sat in the wall, painted the same color as the rest. A sticker on it read B7. The officer opened the panel with his gloved hand. A hollow space waited behind it, long and low, like a tunnel under my house. The flashlight beam reached only a few feet before the darkness ate it. Something in there shifted and then went still. The officer froze, listening. Then he backed away and told everyone to step up the stairs. After that, things moved fast in a way that felt unreal. My neighbor was taken to the station. My landlord changed every lock that night. He ordered new lights and cameras for my side of the street, not my neighbor. The tow company kept the neighbor's car until fees stacked high enough to hurt. 2 days later, a woman I recognized from the sidewalk posted a short video of my neighbor arguing with the tow driver. She did not name me, but she named him. Other people added their own stories under it. Complaints about him watching windows. Complaints about him filming people. The comments filled with the same words over and over: creepy, control, trap. His confidence did not survive daylight. He stopped appearing on his porch. A week later, his place went dark and stayed dark. A moving truck came early in the morning. The porch camera vanished. The chalk lines near my driveway were washed away by rain. I regained my driveway, but I did not regain comfort. I kept thinking about that schedule and those time windows. I kept hearing his quiet voice through my door, breathing close enough to fog the gap. On the night my new locks were installed, I found one last thing. It was taped under my mailbox, hidden from the street. A brand new key, cut to match my new lock with a fresh tag tied to it. My address was written on the tag in neat ink, and under it, someone had added 2 letters and a number. B7.